Good morning and welcome to this year's first Power Breakfast from the Greater Wilmington Business Journal. And today we're going to be focusing on Hollywood East, a topic we haven't checked in a while, but there have been several developments that are going on both in the industry and here locally. And so this is how we wanted to start our first one of this year. As John mentioned, it's been 40 years since Dino De Laurentiis came to town for Firestarter, and in a series of events after that, basically started what has become the film industry that we have here today. Over the decades, the Wilmington area has been the setting for several Marvel superheroes, countless angsty teenagers, and of course the iconic ear from Blue Velvet. But along with that growth over the past 40 years, there's also been a number of different chapters and ups and downs. Some of those that we'll be talking about today, and as we look on the horizon for what's next in the next season of our film industry. Get it? Next season. And assembled today for this panel are some very familiar names in this industry, those who have seen those chapters that we'll be talking about, longtime participants in the industry, along with a special guest from California who is joining us as well. So before we start this discussion, I just want to remind you, of course, as always at our Power Breakfast, we want to hear from the audience and the questions that you have in mind. On your tables are tent cards with a QR code if you want to text a question in. You can also text it in the number 910-264-8955, and we'll get to those, as many of those as we can. Please include your name and table number, and we'll have a microphone come to you. So to kick us off and to hear a little bit about who we're talking with today, I'm going to ask, starting with Dan, to tell us a little bit about what you do and how you fit into the film industry here in Wilmington.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dan Brawley. I'm the Chief Instigating Officer at Cucaloris. I grew up here in Wilmington, and I worked briefly at the studio. Jock Brandes gave me my first job. My dad was very proud that I became a welder after graduating from Duke University. There were a few years he was a little bit worried about me. But I'm out there, and a guy named Brett Watkins comes by the welding shop and says, "Hey, me and some of my friends put on this film festival, and we heard that you were the kind of guy who might be interested in getting involved." And so I just kept showing up at Cucaloris. I became the director of Cucaloris in 1999, so it's been 25 years. And Cucaloris is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. Thank you. Many of you have been a part of that journey, and as sponsors, as staff members, as volunteers. And one of the things that I think is interesting about this current moment is that there's a second generation of leadership. And in some cases, it's literally a second generation. Somebody like Erica Dunton, whose father was one of the founding figures of our industry. And so it really is the next season for the film industry. Filmmaking has changed in a way that is just absolutely fascinating. In 1994, when Cucaloris started, you needed a 16-millimeter camera. You had to ship your film off and wait before you could actually see what you had captured. And now I can go to Best Buy and buy some of the best equipment in the world and make a movie today and upload it to the internet, and you can watch it tonight. And so the way that filmmaking has transformed is absolutely fascinating. And I think Wilmington is in a really special position as being a town that has a legacy in the film industry. And so many second-generation film industry professionals are here who know the history and are really well-positioned to continue to position Wilmington as a leader in the industry. So, yeah, thanks.
Johnny?
So I've been with the Wilmington Film Commission for 25 years. I came to Wilmington in 1984 as a college student and worked on a film called Cat's Eye. And then moved back here the next year after I graduated and worked as a location manager in the industry for 15 years, based in Wilmington and working throughout the Southeast. And then got asked to come in and join the Film Commission in 1999, and so I've been there for 25 years now. A lot of people have heard of the Film Commission. Some people know what we do, some don't. I always tell folks that kind of like our folks at Wilmington Business Development, Cliff Pyron and Scott Satterfield, they get a call from somebody looking to bring a company into town, and they're looking for maybe some land, a building, some job training, rail access, gas, whatever kind of infrastructure they may need. I get a call from a producer who says, I need a small town, I need a high school, I need 2 or 3 different kinds of houses for neighborhoods, I need some city streets, maybe some dirt roads, and if we can find all that, and we have sound stages to build sets in, we have crew, then I'm gonna bring a TV series there and spend $50 million in year 1. And then if that series is successful and we get a year 2, then maybe the budget goes to $55, $60 million. So for us, it's economic development. It's just a very unique, different kind of economic development. The older I get, I find the fewer stars that I know that are in these shows, especially the teenage shows. And they give me names and they just bounce off my heads and I have to text my daughters and say, who is this person? But what I get excited about is, it's a TV series. So it's like, okay, there's 150 to 200 jobs. They're going to work for 6 months. They're going to spend $50 million. And I start to add up the numbers and the jobs. And so that ultimately is what we do. It's just different kind of economic development. Everybody gets excited about it. But basically it comes down to jobs and money coming into the local economy.
Okay, and Susie?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Susie Hamilton. I've done a few things. I know a lot of you in the room. I've seen the film industry from all sides. I grew up in the industry, part of that second generation probably that Dan was referring to. My father was a broadcast engineer for many years and built television stations all over the world. And I got to interface with people at Carol Co Studios very early on. A lady out in the audience by the name of Francine DeCourcy took me under her wing. There she is. Very early in the day, and I did an internship with her at Carol Co during the filming of Billy Bathgate, which was a bomb. It was terrible, but I was lucky enough to get to watch the dailies with Bruce Willis and Rain Man, Dustin Hoffman. And there's some cute stories there, but I was really struck, and I was a little bit starstruck because who wouldn't be by those two when you're 20 years old. But what I was really captured my attention was the need that how much work goes into producing a film or a television show. That 90% of what you see on the screen has happened behind the scenes. And so when I finished messing around in the General Assembly and turned that over to Representative Butler and left the governor's office, we started in 2021 the Film Partnership of North Carolina with my partner Darla McGlamory from IATSE and our other partner Dr. Lauren Vilchik with the North Carolina School of the Arts. And our focus is to provide internships to support and grow our crew base, our future crew base here in North Carolina. We lost some of our crew base. We've had some up and downs, as all of you are very aware. So we feel like this was an opportunity to go ahead and begin to build that back, but more importantly, to diversify that crew base. The crews, traditionally, they're taught more like being handed down, the craft being handed down from father to son, mother to daughter. So there was not a lot of people that looked differently within the crew base. And that's international. That's not something that's specific to North Carolina. But what we think we've been able to do over the last couple of years is really introduce those opportunities to people who would not normally have the opportunity to network on set and to make those relationships that are critical to continue your work in that industry for the crew. So that's, simply put, that's what we do with the Film Partnership of North Carolina.
Great, thanks. And Christy?
Good morning. My name is Christy Ray. I think I'm on this panel representing the independent sector of Wilmington Film, which is a huge part of our infrastructure and something that I'm excited to kind of demystify for all of you today. I've been working in the independent industry here in Wilmington since 2009. I started my career as an actress and worked on a feature film that was produced here called Pieces of Talent back in 2009. So I've been here about 15 years. I moved here 10 years ago and founded a production company, which I co-own with Erica Arley. It's called Honeyhead Films. And we are a female-led boutique production company. We're award-winning, and we, like Susie, have a mission to diversify the crews, both below the line, above the line, and in front of the camera. And that's for women, for Black and brown filmmakers, for stories of marginalized people who have not yet had a chance for their voices to be heard. I'm uniquely connected with Johnny and with Dan as well. Cucaloris has been a proud supporter of Honeyhead and the work that we've produced since our very early years. I think our first films have all, had a chance to premiere at Cucaloris, and this past November we were the opening night feature film, A Song for Imogene, which sold out Thalian Hall, so really proud of that. Thank you. Johnny's been wonderful connecting us and helping to legitimize the work we do in the independent sector. I think there's a big gap in these kind of like major budget films that we'll hear about from Ashley, and the more, sub-$1 million movies that we're currently working on to build that workforce. And what Susie's doing with the film partnership greatly aligns with our education branch at Honeyhead. We have a summer camp for high school girls. It's called Shoot Like a Girl, where we teach young women how to be writers and directors and producers and create their stories and build confidence and learn how to learn how to share those stories. And there's a huge diversity initiative with that. We've had scholarships by a lot of these people on this panel offered to girls, so it's not just young women in Wilmington that can afford a summer camp. We're also creating opportunities for lower socioeconomic girls to have their stories be told. So that's Honeyhead in a nutshell and our mission, and I'm very honored to be here. So thank you, Rob, for putting together such a wonderful panel.
Yeah. And our visiting guest, Ashley.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. I started in this industry 30 plus years ago. I came from the crew. I was an assistant director. I'm actually Canadian by birth, American by marriage, and I'm very proud in this room to say I married a Southerner. I did. So I will admit, every time I'm here, I go to the local bakery and I grab a few biscuits and I bring them home. Because I'll admit, in Los Angeles, you really can't get a good biscuit. They really don't know what they're doing. But, I come at this industry, like I said, I started at the crew. I started on the ground. And from there, I moved to Los Angeles 25 years ago from Toronto, and I started my career as an executive. I worked my way up. I worked at HBO as an executive covering production. I worked at Disney and ABC for many years as an executive, and most recently was head of production for Legendary Entertainment, where I ran their television group. I really think it's a valuable note to you all because I come at this industry as a past decision maker who looked at where to bring productions. And so working with our partners here locally, I will give Johnny some great props. I've known Johnny for 20 plus years. I'm trying to remember when we first met back in Los Angeles. And of course, Guy Gaster at the state as great partners in making sure that they were heavy in Los Angeles in promoting Wilmington as a destination for talent. But now working with CineSpace and making this great investment here in North Carolina, we're very much dedicated to that same mission and being large advocates to what, truthfully, many people have mentioned here today. There's a great history of filmmaking here. There are great workers, there are wonderful filmmakers, and we always talk about there being, three major pieces of a great filming location. You've got to have great facilities. Okay, I'm a little biased, right? Of course, we've got that, and great infrastructure. You've got to have a great crew base, which does exist here, and we too have initiatives of diversity and education, which we can talk more about through our CineCares program, but also a great tax incentive, right? So we work with all those three things in concert to make sure that we make our respective regions as attractive as possible for destinations for talent. And we're thrilled to be here. We're thrilled to be a part of the community. Everyone has been incredibly welcoming. Not just the food, sorry, I know I was focused on the food. And I was focused on a beach house for a period there too, I have to say. It's a wonderful place to live. But in all sincerity, we're thrilled to be here. We wouldn't have made the investment unless we were dedicated and believed in this community and the workforce that exists here. And we're so excited to work with all of you to further grow it.
Thank you very much. And now that we know who you are talking with here at the panel, again, feel free to text in those questions. But Ashley, also thank you for making the trip here. I'm sure most of you in this room know the backstory, but just to fill you in, last fall, CineSpace purchased the studio facilities in Atlanta, Screen Gems' studio space in Atlanta and in Wilmington, including the facility on 23rd Street with those 10 sound stages. So Ashley, what can you say in terms of why did CineSpace make that acquisition, and how does Wilmington fit into your company's overall strategy when you're looking at us?
Sure. So for those of you who don't know, we are one of the largest stage space and production service providers in the world. When I joined the company 2 years ago, we were in 2 locations. We were in Toronto and we were in Chicago. And one of our missions was to grow the respective regions in which we operate. And one of the main key factors in how we decided where we were going to expand to was that we wanted a really diverse portfolio under one global roof that we could service a lot of different creative needs for filmmakers. So we didn't want each of our locations to have the exact same pieces to them. So we feel that Wilmington fits in really, really well to that, right? Naturally a coastal city. It has a different look and feel to our other cities. We're in Toronto, Chicago, Atlanta, Wilmington. We're doing a development in Los Angeles, and we also are in Berlin. We own Studio Babelsberg, which is the oldest studio in the world at 112 years. But each one in the respective, aspects are very diverse. And so Wilmington itself was something that we felt in partnership, as I mentioned, with Johnny and Guy, we could easily sell back in Los Angeles, right? Within a larger portfolio of assets to make sure that we're servicing those creative needs for filmmakers and decision makers back in LA. So it fits in really well,
Okay, and everyone feel free to jump in on this, but just to kind of take a pulse check of where the industry is now, and Johnny, maybe you can start us off. The most recent disruption or change that the local bases had to contend with was, of course, the writers and actors strike of last year and what that did to productions locally. So now that that's been resolved, where would you say marketing of projects stands now, or what the immediate future looks like?
Yeah, so the industry's been challenged the past few years. Obviously with COVID, there was an international shutdown on all production. We were able to come back from that. We then had the largest year ever in history with productions in Wilmington spending about $320 million the year after COVID. Then we had the writers and actor strikes last year, again, which was not a local issue, but a nationwide issue, which shrunk production considerably. Just for comparison, so you can see, again, in 21, right after COVID, we had over $300 million. Last year, because of the strikes, we had about $43 million. And so that's direct spend in this local community that shows you the difference in what we were missing there last year. Obviously, the strikes are behind us now. There are some other labor issues that may come up later this year, which still have productions kind of hesitating a little bit. What I like to say, though, is that I think during this time of stress that the industry has had, nothing has changed in North Carolina. We still have, in fact, things have improved. We've got CineSpace coming in. Obviously, they wouldn't have come to Wilmington if they didn't see the opportunities here to invest in this community. So they have come in. We've also got the construction of Dark Horse Studios, a new property that's being built here in Wilmington. So to see a local investor put money into that to grow our infrastructure, again, is very important. We've still got our crew base. We've still got just the great place that people love to work. And we've still got a good incentive program. Thanks to our legislative delegation who's over here today, I would like to certainly thank them. I always say that, they always get phone calls and hear when people don't like things, but very seldom do they get phone calls telling people they like things. And so, yes. Everyone always asks me, have you spoken to your legislators about the film incentive? I'm like, you know what? I don't need to speak to my legislators about the film incentive. It's the other 99 counties in North Carolina that have to get on board with everything. But they've been a great help with that. So we have all of those things. And so while the industry has been sort of disorganized, I think Wilmington has sort of been retooling and gearing up and getting ready for the next wave, or as you said by titling this panel today, the next season of what Wilmington can offer. So I think we're getting ready for what the future can hold here. Our clients have always enjoyed working in this community. I won't name any other cities, but there are other cities to the south of us that are very popular with filmmakers. that people go there and work, and it's just another place to work. It's just another place to do a job. But every filmmaker that comes to this town, we always talk about quality of life and what that means in this community. And bar none, they all come to me afterwards and say, you know what, I want to try and figure out how I can come back here and work again here. Or I'm getting toward the end of my career, and I want to figure out how I can move here and maybe work a few more years and retire. Or my wife and I are looking at buying a second home here. So again, they always want to be here, and so I think we've just kind of been retooling, getting ready, and so hopefully when productions are ready to move forward again, then we'll be in a good position.
Well, I'll say that I travel to film festivals all over the world, and you might not know it here, but we have one of the best film commissioners in the industry. People know about Johnny. They know he's been here a long time, and I think one of the things that distinguishes Wilmington, Johnny worked as a locations manager, as he said earlier, and so people know that when they come to Wilmington that there's a depth of experience, and that's not necessarily the case everywhere you go. And I think it's very fitting, Ashley on one end and I'm on the other end of this panel. People ask me all the time, what is the best thing that can happen for independent film in Wilmington? And I say without any hesitation at all that the best thing that can happen for independent film in Wilmington is for the studio on 23rd Street to be full. Iron Man 3 put more money in the hands of creative people than anything I could ever do. We have a grant program at Cucaloris. I'm very proud to say we distribute $24,000 every year to North Carolina filmmakers. But man, the amount of money that comes into the creative community from a big production like Iron Man 3 is just incredible. The film industry was a pioneer in the gig economy, and so what you have is people who are well paid, and whether they like it or not, every 3 months or so they have some time off. And so what happens when creative people have a little bit of time off? I think the development of downtown Wilmington is a great example of what happens. And so I'm delighted anytime the studio is busy, you see more resources come into our city. I think the other part of that, let's not be confused that it just works one way. We're down at this end of the spectrum where new ideas happen, where relationships happen. You meet the people that you work for at film festivals and at other events. You build those relationships down here that will lead you to the other end of the spectrum in the film industry. And so, again, with Johnny and with the resources we have in Wilmington, we're in a really good position to take advantage of what looks like another really healthy, several years. In the film industry, those of you who've been here for very long know that this isn't unusual, right? We go through these cycles. Maybe it's because filmmakers are volatile people. Maybe it's because politics sometimes get involved. But that's because people care so much. If you want to find out what's happening in your society, go to the movie theater, and you'll see that, on the screen.
Dan, I'll add to what you're speaking about having the studio lot full and how that affects independent film. I think there's a really beautiful opportunity when everyone's busy, right? All of our department heads are hired to employ people coming out of university, to take those K-FEAR students and to take those UNCW grads and give them a chance and help with workforce development, maybe hiring department heads on potential over proof. So maybe you're not, the old salty key grip who's first in line at every studio production because he's booked, his crew's booked. You've got these other departments and they're too busy to say yes to an independent production, and so we're able to come in and support these up-and-coming rising talent and continue to develop our workforce, not just above the line in producers, writers, and directors, but cinematographers, gaffers, sound mixers, locations. We've got costume designers here, all people who need an opportunity to show that they can add value to a film set, and we don't necessarily need to import these positions coming from Los Angeles, hire DPs from out of town. But my company is really in the business of growing the talent here in Wilmington to remain competitive in the industry.
Absolutely. When it's busy, there are so many more training opportunities for everyone, and that's how an industry grows. And we've seen that here. We've seen that in other neighboring states. That, to be frank, in my past life, I would fly people from Los Angeles to many different states to do jobs not just at the DP level, but the painter level.
Right.
Right? So this is across the entire span of jobs that exist within the industry. So when we're busy, everyone's learning, everyone's growing, and the scale and scope of these productions has grown so much that there are not just main unit. There's all these different groups of people, sometimes shooting different pieces for the film or for the TV show, and there are opportunities for those who are in the second position or the third position to actually get bumped up, right, and learn from those mentors that are local here, and some that are coming from Los Angeles as well that are also teaching, right? So it benefits everyone, and that grows the industry as a whole. You know, when we look for workforce development and opportunities of demand, we want to create strong, stable jobs so that that growth can continue, and we've seen that here, so we're going to continue to push that. But yeah, it's good.
I was going to say, and that kind of leads into a question that Joel Getty has, Table 5.
Hi, thank you. My name's Joel Getty. I'm a local filmmaker, and my day job is with PPD Thermo Fisher, so I don't do filmmaking full-time, but you know, I have a couple of award-winning shorts under my belt. I'm going to be going to Portugal in a couple of weeks for a film festival, and I want to know, you know, what resources are available to independent filmmakers for, let's say, funding or other studio space or things that maybe somebody like me can't afford because I don't have $55 million to make a movie with, but I do have a little crew, and I have a lot of really creative, inspirational people that I work with that are very talented. So number one, what kind of resources are available for someone like me? And then number two, when somebody like me, you know, how do we develop that top of the line, the writers, the directors, the lead actors that are coming right from Wilmington so that we can keep our ecosystem going even when kind of like Hollywood doesn't have anything going on here?
Well, you know, Cucaloris runs a grant program, an award program called the Film to NC Fund through a partnership with the NC Film Office and with some funding from the North Carolina legislature. And that application will be open in a couple months. I think last year we gave out 18 awards to different projects and development across the state of North Carolina. The only requirement is that you be a permanent resident of North Carolina. There's another grant program in the eastern part of the state, the Foot Candle Film Society, gives out about $10,000 every year. The North Carolina Arts Council is a great resource. The local Arts Council, Rhonda Bellamy here. And, you know, the other resources that are available, you know, there are the educational institutions that are here that have a wealth of talent. I mean, we bring more students from Cape Fear Community College and UNCW into our team and onto our staff. It's a bit of a training program of sorts, not necessarily to be a filmmaker, but to work in the nonprofit world. But you're already going to film festivals. I mean, that's the number one resource. And one of the things that I tell filmmakers, there's this myth that you go to a film festival and you get distribution. But the reality is that film festivals are about building relationships. By the time you get a distribution deal, it's likely to be with the person you met at the Toronto Film Festival 7 years ago at a karaoke party. You know, and so you've built that relationship. Just like any of you who are in business, you know, you build the relationship before you sign that business deal. And it might take years, especially when you're talking about distributing a feature film. And so your number one resource are the people that you're going to meet at the film festival in Portugal, at the Cucaloris Film Festival. And man, look at the film festival landscape in Wilmington. If you had told me in 1999 when I started working for Cucaloris that there'd be a film festival almost every month in Wilmington, North Carolina, I would have laughed. But you've got the North Carolina Black Film Festival coming up. You've got the DocuTime Documentary Film Festival. I mean, you look at the calendar, and there's a film festival every month, and there's a festival every 3 days in Wilmington. You know, but so the resources for filmmakers, and Christopher Everett, who's here, who works for the Southern Documentary Fund, another great resource based here in North Carolina. So I don't know, Christy, if you could share some other things that you reached.
I have a thought about practical studio space too, right? Maybe you cannot afford to work with Ashley and her team, or even Dark Horse, that feels attainable on a larger budget, independent level. There are a plethora of production companies in Wilmington, such as Lighthouse Films, Wallaby Media, obviously Honeyhead. Port City Films just opened up a beautiful stage. I don't know if you've been to Curtis's new facility, but it's small, right? He's got like a nice cyc wall. It's an attainable size if you're looking to build something or utilize like post audio. He can do ADR recording there, has a wonderful post team. Lighthouse has been incredibly supportive to the independent film community, especially to Honeyhead, being an equipment vendor for projects for years. And we have a working relationship where there's a lot of work trade that goes on. It's not just Honeyhead coming in to say, hi, can we get a deal on this equipment package? It's Brad calling me and saying, I need you to produce this no budget production with me, and then you can have the equipment for the project. So we've got this like really lovely working relationship where maybe it's not an exchange of capital that's happening, because we know as independent filmmakers that's really hard to come by. But you're giving your time and your resources and your talents to help support other production companies in the community. I want to answer your second question, which was about, can you repeat it just so I get it right?
Yeah, how do we develop like the above the line talent that is coming directly from our region?
Sure, I love that question. I've actually given that a lot of thought. There are very tangible ways to develop our above-the-line talent. A lot of people in this room might not know exactly what that means. That's our local writers, our local producers, and our local directors. And historically, they come from other markets, right? They're coming from Los Angeles or New York, Toronto, the UK. They are attractive to everything that Johnny talked about with the film industry here, right? They see Wilmington, our beautiful locations, our world-renowned below-the-line crew, our great tax incentives. Those are all things that bring them here, seal the deal, get them to say yes to their series. However, when they leave the state, they're also taking the revenue with them. And oftentimes, these larger productions aren't affording the opportunity to grow our infrastructure at those department head levels that we're talking about. So our costume designers are often coming from out of state, or our production designers, our DPs, these really high level creative decision makers and leadership roles. As an industry, we don't have a lot of opportunities to invest in the education and the training for those positions. And so I think removing some of the barriers to entry for local above-the-line creatives is a great way to continue to build that infrastructure. And that can come in really simple ways with the tax incentive, for instance. An idea, Johnny, correct me if I'm wrong, but currently there's a $500,000 threshold to apply for the tax incentive, and you have to have a streaming deal associated with your made-for-TV movie or your series to be able to qualify for that. One simple idea would be to remove that streaming qualifier for local production companies, specifically people who are full-time residents here in Wilmington. Because I know as an independent producer, to get a streaming deal in pre-production at the $500 level is probably not going to happen. You need name talent attached to your project, right? You need movie stars, you need these needle movers. And those MGs, those minimum guarantees from distributors, are becoming less likely and more rare these days anyway. So if we didn't have that kind of barrier to entry, we could turn a $500,000 film into a $625,000 film. And I know that independent producers could stretch those dollars, and they would be reinvesting them back into workforce development in a way that studio productions just can't take the time to sincerely and intimately do and grow our workforce here. It's nothing against what they're doing. We all work in tandem together. But it's a way to continue to make sure that we're remaining competitive. I think having more department heads, more writers, directors, producers here in Wilmington would only attract showrunners to our community because it cuts budget costs. We don't have to pay to fly people in, to house them for months and months on end. They live here. We can now pitch our above-the-line teams. Our directors and writers can come on, to direct episodes of shows that are using Wilmington as a backdrop for their series, and maybe that can continue for years to come.
And Christy, since you mentioned film incentives, we have a question from Table 6 about film incentives.
Hi, thanks. Yep, my original question was about film incentives and just how it may or may not be competitive with the East Coast market. But Christie's kind of already touched on that a bit. So if I,
Well,
I
that's
mean,
okay. It's Super Tuesday. We can get political. We have the state legislators here. I don't want to make the panel uncomfortable. How about in terms of if you had a magic wand, is there anything you would change with North Carolina's state film incentives? What would you add on? What would you change? Anyone want to?
Well, I will say, look, creative is always a key driver when making decisions with regards to filmmaking and television making, right? That's never going away. You know, I need a city, I need a beach, I need a, whatever the location may be. But I have to tell you, from the seats that these executives sit at in, let's say, Los Angeles, right alongside that is financial, okay? Right. Is the consideration is how they put the most amount of money on the screen to decide where to bring a production which will bring large economic impact to the region, which we've discussed today. That has changed greatly over the years, that pressure on the studio heads to make sure that they're picking locations that are financially competitive, not just what works creatively, is side by side right now. And in some instances, I would even say has taken a higher position. So, as we've all seen as well, many states, and this is not isolated to the United States, this is a global challenge. People are improving their tax incentives because they see the economic impact. Right. They see that these programs are net positive results within their communities, and they see the growth that comes. There are some neighboring states that a decade ago didn't have production designers, didn't have these positions to hire, and now you can hire locally across the board for these productions. So it does work. So making sure that the tax incentive is as strong as it can be, as stable as it can be, and as competitive as it can be is of paramount to making sure that we are the most attractive destination and that we also then can create demand, right? And this is constantly changing. This is a world that, look, I gave props, but the whole legislative team, we've got Guy, we've got Johnny, they're on this all the time to make sure that they're reviewing it. There's always adjustments that can be made. Yeah. Sincerely, I wish I had a magic wand, right? It's complex to make these changes, but the best that we can do is to make sure that we're continuing to educate about the economic impact that it brings, the job stability that it brings, and there are lots of examples locally, even here in the United States, that we can point to say, well, if you just made this little tweak with a cap, or you just made a tweak here, you could be at a different level at a competitive pace with these other states to even get on the board. So we're very passionate about that. I mentioned, right, great facilities, great workforce. Tax incentive is a huge driver of that decision-making tree. And if you fall behind and you don't continually look to evolve your tax incentive, you'll fall behind. But I will give props. I have to mention one more thing. There was a hiccup that happened in North Carolina. And I have been a client of North Carolina with past productions and love filming here. And I have to give props to the state and to everyone involved and at the local level as well when they brought the tax incentive back. It was, well, first of all, it was really clear when it went away, the impact that it had on the state and the community. And people did move, that was mentioned. And now our job is to increase that competitive angle to bring people home, right? People want to live here. This is a lovely place to not only shoot and work, it's a great place to live, right? So we work with our partners, and I can't give enough, kudos to the team at the state and the local level for seeing the need and bringing that tax incentive back. It's of paramount, right, to stay within the industry and be competitive. So, thank you.
Yeah. I'll jump in here. Yeah, we did. We had a terrible hiccup when it went away there for a couple of years. And luckily, again, the grant program that we utilize today has stabilized and has been quite effective. The good news about North Carolina, not just what's happening here in Wilmington, but the really good news in North Carolina is that the film industry and the incentives related to the film and television production industry have always been bipartisan. They've always been bipartisan. When they reach the legislature for lawmaking, you have people from both sides of the aisle coming together to make sure it happens. The real issue has been a little more challenging, and that is rural versus urban, perhaps, in that there are counties and legislators across the state that feel like the film and television production industry only benefits Wilmington. And I know that Senator Lee and Representatives Butler and Representative Davis have all worked very, very hard within their caucuses and within the chambers to explain to people that all of North Carolina benefits from the presence of the film and television production industry. We've touched 78 of the 100 counties in the state. But I would be remiss if I didn't give real props here today to the city of Wilmington and New Hanover County, because they were willing to take a chance in working with the film partnership to prove the concept that we could accommodate paid internships that do not replace professional crew. They are subsequent to the professional crew because we want them to learn their crafts, and we want them to learn the safety associated with being on set and all of those things. But the city of Wilmington and New Hanover County really took a chance with making this happen, and it did. And then I'm also very happy to say that Governor Cooper put funds in for the Film Partnership of North Carolina so that we could take it statewide. And Senator Lee on the Senate side was able to secure those funds in our budget. And of course, Representatives Davis and Butler have always been supportive of the industry. So I say all this just to say that it really, although it is Super Tuesday, it really does transcend politics. This is a clean industry. This is it's a good industry. It's a job creator. 90% of what goes on in filmmaking you just never see on the screen. So there are hundreds and hundreds of job opportunities associated with this program. And so North Carolina, although we've had some fits and starts, I think that may be just the nature of the business. Wouldn't you agree? We are artists. You know, we do get a little volatile here and there. And so, but the stabilizing factor has been that it's been bipartisan. And I really think that's important for all of us to remember it. It's not a political football. This is a good thing. So.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like we should take a step back for those of us who don't work within the film industry. And Johnny, you can help us out here. Can you explain what the state's current incentive model package is? And then maybe even explain, you know, how does that compare with how other states have structured their incentives, particularly states that you compete with on marketing projects?
Sure, not to try and get too much in the weeds with it, but our incentive is what's called a 25% film grant program. They have different titles in different states. Some are called tax credits, some are called incentives. Our clients basically just say, look, just tell us how it works and how we can get the money. We don't care what the name of it is. But in North Carolina, we have a grant program. Essentially, productions come into the state, they spend money here. There are minimum expenditures that they have to meet based on the type of project that they're doing, whether it's a television series or a film. So they have to meet those minimum thresholds to qualify. Once they spend money here, hiring crew, renting equipment, purchasing and renting product, at the end of the production, they have to have an audit performed. And so we know down to the penny exactly how much they spent in North Carolina. The audit also ensures that all of their payroll taxes have been paid, sales taxes have been paid, everything has been captured, that nothing has slipped through the cracks. And so we're able to identify down to the penny. Once that's calculated, then they get back 25% of what they have spent in North Carolina. And again, there are caps on how much they can get back depending on the type of project. But the idea is that, again, they've spent money in North Carolina. It's sort of the clause, the but-for clause, in that, but for this project coming here, we would not have this tax revenue. Mm-hmm. If this production was not here, these people would not have had jobs, so that payroll tax would not have existed. The $55 million that one television series spends during a season, generates all sorts of different types of taxes. Those would not have been generated if that production was not here. So the idea is that they come in and produce the project, then North Carolina gives them a check back for the amount, the 25%. Every state, again, is a little bit different in how they operate. And there are people at the studios now. When I would go and see Ashley in Los Angeles, she used to be at ABC, which is a division of Disney. And there was actually a lady at Disney who was sort of considered the incentive guru in the industry.
The godmother.
And used to, I could call people like Ashley and say, hey, I'm going to be here. I'd like to get together and have a meeting, and we could schedule a meeting and get together. Now, this lady finds out that I contact people like Ashley and sort of stops me in my tracks and says, wait a minute, before you can come in here and have meetings, I need to review the incentive in North Carolina and make sure that it is vetted and that we think it's something that is attractive for us. If it is, then you sort of get an all-access pass and you get to come in and have meetings with people. If we don't think the incentive works, then you basically can't come through the gates.
Wow.
Right.
And it's that direct.
And that pressure's only grown over the last 5 to 10 years exponentially. So it puts even more pressure to be looking at your programs and examining, do they need to be revised? Or, the industry has changed so much. Who would have thought we'd all be watching, I don't have my phone here, but right, TV on I don't know how your kids watch shows, but my kids don't watch television, right? It's just a completely different beast as to how you even, consume content now, right? It's changed the business dramatically. So we need to just continually look. And one thing I want to add to what Johnny said, just to remind, I'd mentioned it briefly, but I really need to state, the amount of money that comes from a production, it outweighs the amount of money that's paid out, right? These are net positive programs. It's not a subsidy. It's something that actually economically benefits, not only on the tax side, but we talk about the ripple effect into the communities in which we operate. During COVID, we used to call ourselves a strategic recovery industry because when we work, everybody works, right? It's not just industry-specific vendors. It's everything from hotels to airlines to restaurants to drivers to lumber yards. It covers so many different areas that we call it a ripple effect, right? So when a production comes to a community, it spans out, right? And can touch so many different areas. They got to buy, material to make clothes. They have to, there's so many different avenues by which the money is actually dispensed within the community and the state. So increasing demand will only help that.
And you touched on something that I want to mention, and that's the way we watch movies has changed. When you go to the Stone theaters, then they have recliners. They didn't put those in because they were selling too many tickets, right? Two things happened. They started looking at attendance numbers and how they were decreasing and their average attendance. They also were competing with your living room. We all have incredible equipment in our homes now. And in your home, you can turn up the volume. You can turn on the subtitles if you want. You can customize the experience to exactly what you want. And so the way we watch movies is just completely different from, so an example I'll give, I think it was maybe 13 years ago, we screened a film called We Need to Talk About Kevin. Tilda Swinton starred in this film. Some of you may remember that movie. I sold 550 tickets, filled Thalian Hall. The distributor had infrared glasses to make sure nobody was pirating the film. And the reason was that if you lived in southeastern North Carolina, that night was the only chance you would ever get to see that movie. It wasn't going to be on a streaming platform. It definitely wasn't going to be in a Blockbuster in 6 months, when I think they were still around 13 years ago. And so that's one of the things that I think distinguishes an experience like Cucaloris. We don't just show movies. If you come to the Cucaloris Film Festival, a comedian or a spoken word poet is going to get up and do something unusual, hopefully very entertaining before you watch the movie. And then maybe the most important part is that the filmmakers are going to be there afterwards. And if you come to our cinema on Princess Street, I know some of you were there recently. We screened a documentary about the firefighters' uniforms. Several of our public officials were there because it's such an important issue. We had firefighters talking about the stories from the film, giving it a personal a touch. And so, so much more now, the experience that we provide at Cucaloris, the experience you might have at Jingo's Playhouse on Princess Street, is about a community experience. You could watch the movie at home, but you're not going to get to see your friends. You're not going to meet somebody who is part of the story. And another really good example is the opening night film at last year's Cucaloris Film Festival. Thalian Hall was full, and everybody in the room had a personal connection to what was happening on the screen. And so today, if I was going to screen We Need to Talk About Kevin, I might play it in a 100-seat theater, and I would be really hopeful that I could get somebody from the film. Maybe I could get Tilda Swinton to send us a video from her phone introducing the film, and that I could sell maybe 75 tickets. And so that, again, this spectrum, right? I spend a lot of time thinking about how people watch movies. And so, a little plug, I encourage you to come to Jingo's Playhouse to see a movie. We'll be celebrating our 20th anniversary coming up at Jingo's Playhouse. But even more important, in November, as we celebrate our 30th anniversary. And what you'll see on the screen is you'll see films made by Wilmington filmmakers. You'll see films made by high school students who've never made a film before. But you also will see a film that'll be nominated for an Academy Award. If you want to win your Academy Award, pool with your friends in the short category or the documentary category, Cucaloris is a really good place to do that research.
Vicki,
We'll be there.
if I may, I have an interesting anecdote that kind of connects across the spectrum to everything we're talking about. I think a lot of people could relate to this case study, we'll say. In 1996, Jonas Pate produced an independent film here in Wilmington. It was shot entirely locally in the Cape Fear region, and it went on to premiere at a festival called Sundance Film Festival, and that's a really notable accomplishment. However, if I've studied up on his IMDb correctly, it was 20 years before he was awarded to direct a studio show that came to Wilmington called Good Behavior in 2016. So it took 20 years for our local director to get a chance to lead the crew just for one episode, not his whole series, right? And you might know Jonas Pate because 4 years after that, he's the creator of one of Netflix's best-selling, highest-rated shows called OBX. And 4 years after that, he's returning home to Wilmington with his new original series called The Runarounds. It's going to be shooting here this summer. It just booked an 8-episode miniseries direct to Amazon. It's wonderful. This local man is bringing back the infrastructure, the economy, all of the, infusing the capital, reinvesting it back in Wilmington. But what he's also doing with that is hiring a local cinematographer, a local production manager, local casting directors, not just to do the local casting, but as producers on the above-the-line team. And that's the kind of pipeline. I mean, it's a shame that it took 30 years. How can we expedite that process? How can our incentives help to support these independent creators so that they can return back to Wilmington to stay here? I would hate for it to be 2054 before Honeyhead Films could bring our own original series to Wilmington. I would love to see that pipeline shortened, and for everyone in this room and on this panel to be able to work together to see that it's possible. There are actionable steps to create momentum and real tangible traction to make that happen.
And if you want to watch that film, it's called The Grave. I think you can watch it on Tubi online. And it's screened at the 1996 Cucaloris Film Festival. Okay. And I think this another sort of part of this pipeline, I doubt anybody here remembers, but in 2007, a young actress named Greta Gerwig came to Cucaloris. Today, I don't think she's going to come back to Cucaloris, but, but that is the pipeline, right? And so Jonas and his brother made this incredible film. I do encourage you to see it. Some parts of it haven't aged well. Other parts you can see that they were already working on their craft in the late 90s. So a lot of the same storylines that you see in Outer Banks are right in the film that they made as their first independent feature.
And Craig Schiffler?
Yeah.
Craig Schiffler is in that one for the actor interest. Yeah.
We're excited to welcome them back.
Yeah.
Great.
I want to shift real quick to AI before we run out of time and make sure we're hitting some of the other more recent developments, potential disruptors on the horizon. And for that, we have, John Staten has a question at table 37 along those lines.
Thank you. Thank you. I had seen where Tyler Perry who has a huge facility in Atlanta, put construction of some new facilities on hold after seeing AI technology that could potentially lessen the need for sets and even locations. Is AI of this type something the film industry in Wilmington should be worried about?
Well, I'm not afraid to talk about this. Weren't we all afraid of photography? Like that was going to be the death of painting. I mean, to me, AI will only push human creativity to completely new heights. Has anybody seen the movie Poor Things? I have no idea how much of that was AI and how much of that was built, and I don't really care. Yorgos Lanthimos, one of the most amazing directors. His first film, Dogtooth, played at Cucaloris in 2010. But I think that is, I can see why people are afraid, but to me, that's just a moment of inspiration. And for those of us who are not afraid to go into new territory, to take risks, that AI just creates new opportunities to take filmmaking, to take every art form to a whole nother level. So I think it just should inspire us to see the endless potential of human creativity.
I agree completely. And I will say, not everything that appears to be an industry killer will be. I mean, I remember the days when we spent what felt like agonizing hours of discussing how we were going to move from film to digital. This was in television, right? Because we always shot everything on film, and there was this transition to digital, right? And everyone was terrified. It was going to change the sparkle in a particular actor's eye that I won't mention. It was just this very, very difficult transition. And people were worried about the technology, and I don't know how to do that, and I don't know how to use that camera, and I don't, they were worried about their livelihood. And where we are today, yeah, film is still used, but primarily, specifically in television, it's all shot digitally. We made the transition, and this industry is incredibly resilient, right? That is something we've empirically seen for decade after decade after decade. So as much as AI may be something we don't have all the answers to yet, and that also plays into our own personal lives as well, but I will say, thank God I have navigation. Thank God for AI navigation. That's what I need on a daily basis. But it's something to be thoughtful about and be educated about, but don't be fearful of it, right? This is progress, and you can't fight technology. It's going to come, I think. And some of the technological advancements that we've seen with these large volume walls and things have only created scale and scope that was never possible before. So that experience can be enriched and filmmakers' visions can be then achieved. So I appreciate we want to be cautious, and people, particularly when they feel that perhaps their job will be replaced, there are things we have to be mindful about, but I think you have to embrace it, and our industry has the resiliency to come out the other side and make a great marriage, I think.
I think caution is the key word, and we saw that, we witnessed that with the strikes, the dual strikes of last year. With AI was such a hot button topic with the SAG-AFTRA agreement and the ratification of that, and also with the WGA. And I'll probably let Johnny speak to IATSE a bit too, and what they're talking about with AI and how it can affect jobs. I think proceeding with caution is incredibly important. I know as an actor myself, there's a huge concern, which now has been thwarted by the ratification of the agreement, that AI could replace you in pictures that are future to be produced, right? Not what you're currently working on now. But I will say I'm proud of SAG-AFTRA for sticking to their guns on these topics and creating real legislation. We now have bipartisan legislation, both in the House and Senate, to protect not only actors and news anchors, but all of the people in this room, public figures, politicians, anyone who has images and videos on the internet, from deepfakes and all kinds of terrible things that can happen with technology when it isn't developed with the gross potential in mind of things that could be misuse of the technology. They're called the No AI Fake Act and the No Fraud Act, and it's holding people accountable on the federal level who are misusing this technology. So there's definitely a need for regulation. I don't disagree with you, Dan. It is progress, and we're here talking about that. How can we remain competitive and have progress? But I do think there is a threat to writers. I know, Vicki, when we were talking about preparing for this event, you mentioned as someone who writes words for a living, it can be a threat to.
I'm irreplaceable, though, right?
Of course.
But John, yourself, I'm sure that you and the work you do, you're concerned as well. I think it affects everyone. It's not just the film industry. So it's something we should keep our eyes on.
Yeah, and on the sort of warning signs side of it, I believe it's 180 photographs. If you have 180 photographs on your Facebook page, your Instagram page, I can take those and make a movie with you doing whatever I want to make you do. And currently, based on what I know, there are no laws that would permit me from doing that. If you want to see a fascinating film about that subject, there's a documentary feature called Another Body. I'm not sure if it's released online yet, but that explains kind of how that is possible, how with only 180 photographs, and every time you hit I agree on your phone when you're dying to share pictures from the birthday party, you're agreeing that somebody else actually owns your image. And so without a doubt, it is a dangerous potential if we don't protect ourselves mainly.
Johnny, real quick, is that an issue? Chrissy just mentioned the potential talks, the potential discussions of IATSE, another potential national industry labor strike. Is that part of that as well? And also, you should probably explain what that is kind of quickly in terms of what you're keeping an eye on with that.
Yeah, so the crew, the majority of the what's called a below-the-line crew, the technicians that work on the production, are part of a union called the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees. And we actually have the local business agent, Darla McGlamry, who's with us here this morning, who represents that crew and looks after their interests on these productions. And all of the different unions, whether it's the writers, the actors, the directors, the IATSE, the Teamsters, they all have contracts that usually last about 3 years. And so every 3 years, those contracts have to be renegotiated. The industry changes, and so they have to be sort of reevaluated. Again, you look at technology and how fast technology changes. AI didn't even exist 3 years ago. I mean, that wasn't even an issue for anybody with writing or acting or doing anything, yet that is now an issue. And so things have to be addressed and things have to be looked at in those contracts. And so if you're in this industry, you're used to that happening every few years with one of the groups. And so this coming year, or this year, we have the IATSE and the Teamsters contracts, which expire in the summer. And so they'll be starting negotiations soon with the producers. Obviously, there's going to be issues and things that they are going to want, making sure that they can keep up with inflation, making sure that they can keep up with trends that are happening in the industry. As things streamline sometimes, then they want to have fewer workers. And so it's making sure that we can keep enough workers on the job to be safe, to get the job done. The union workers are all highly trained, highly experienced. You know what you're getting when you come into a community, and that's one thing when people come to Wilmington to work, they don't have to wonder, well, do these people really know this equipment, and do these people really know how to do this job? They know that when they come here, they're getting seasoned people that are trained and sort of have the good housekeeping stamp of approval, and know that they can just hire them on the job, and on day one, they're going to be safe, they're going to get the job done right, and that they're going to be professional and top-level talent. So again, that'll be happening this year, so we'll see, whether that creates any issues with the industry or not going forward. But as always, they solve them, we move on, and then we look forward again in another few years.
And also looking at this year, I'd be remiss if we didn't bring up Dark Horse Studios. Kirk Engelbright, who's president of that new studio space, we wanted to invite him to the panel, but we didn't work with his traveling logistics. But Johnny, I know you don't speak for them or work for them, but could you just quickly fill us in on what's the latest of their project in terms of opening that new studio space?
Yeah, so Kirk Engelbright, some of y'all may know Kirk, local businessman, entrepreneur, started working with a studio complex a couple of years ago called Dark Horse Studios. It's the old Coastal Beverage facility that's up near Dutch Square Industrial Park. Kurt had bought that facility years ago, and a lot of times when the former Screen Gems facility, now CineSpace, would get full, I would start looking in the community for warehouse space for productions that were coming in and needed spaces to rent on a short-term basis. So Jeremy Phillips, who may be in this room, I don't know, introduced me to Kurt. At the time, Kurt had this warehouse, didn't know what he was going to do with it, and so we started putting productions in there, one after the other. And eventually Kurt said, you know what, I'm going to turn this into a studio complex. Made some improvements on the 40,000 square feet of warehouse space that he currently had, and is now in the process of building two 20,000 square foot tilt-up concrete, brand new buildings, 55 feet to the ceilings. This is class A1 studio sound stages. I mean, there's nothing better in the world than this type of construction and this type of facility. Purpose-built. And so I think what that gives us, again, is the ability for Los Angeles to look at Wilmington and say, okay, this place has been the same for 40 years with one studio complex. There's been different owners that have come through. There's been additions and changes through the years. But there's been one studio there. All of a sudden, somebody's building a new studio there now, and somebody's investing millions of dollars. There must be a reason why Wilmington is popular. There must be a reason why we really need to consider that. So let's take another look at it. So again, I think it's going to keep eyeballs on Wilmington, much like with CineSpace coming in. Again, people in the industry looking at and knowing that CineSpace has a global footprint. And if you look, it's really cool. When I first went to their website, and you go, and across the top of the website, you see Toronto, Chicago, Babelsberg, Germany, and now you see Wilmington. And it's like, you know, that's a pretty good company for us to be in.
Yep.
And so, you know, obviously they saw something here in this community and they saw a value here and that they wanted to invest. So again, for our clients in Los Angeles to see that and say, hey, CineSpace has gone in there and invested in that community. There's also another guy who's building more sound stages there. Wilmington's definitely a place we need to take another look at. So we're certainly glad that Dark Horse is coming online. It just adds to our infrastructure. It adds to our ability here. It's much like, you know, another hotel goes up in town and somebody may ask, you know, the existing hotels, well, what about the competition? What do you think? And it's like, you know what, if there's a need for another hotel, then that's good for everybody because that means we got more people wanting to come here and more people wanting to stay here. So I look at it as, you know, with another studio coming online, that just gives us more capacity, more ability, and more variety for different productions. So we're excited about it.
Okay, thank you. And as we're wrapping up, I want to toss it over to Matthew Coleman at table 34, who has a great question in terms of the theme of this and looking ahead for what's next.
Hey, thank you guys very much. Matthew Coleman with Cap 3, and I wanted to echo what you said about the ripple effect. We actually have some employees that come from the film industry. We work with some studios that are in the film industry. So my question, and I've heard a couple of these answered already, but we talked about a lot of the opportunities that are in the area and some things we could take advantage of, but I was curious what some of the biggest challenges are and how we're going about addressing them or how we need to address them.
As we wrap up, Dan, if you want to start, maybe everyone just kind of give their one takeaway, their one thing that they think should be addressed to help.
Well, I think, you know, maybe this is a challenge, but when Johnny lists those cities, you might notice that Wilmington doesn't really fit. And, you know, I've always felt, this might not be a super popular opinion, but that the fact that Atlanta, Georgia is the #1 production location in the world is actually a good thing for Wilmington, North Carolina. We've always been a city whose film industry personality is about personalities. Dino De Laurentiis moved here. He was one of the last great producers who financed, he did it all, right? And somebody like Jonas Pate is a great example. We need to continue to invest in the personalities who make this film industry valuable. And that goes from the ground up, right? What Darla does, the people that make up the crew base in Wilmington are the heartbeat of this community. And that's what, when you travel around the world and you hear people talking about Wilmington, North Carolina, that's the thing that they remember. They remember that not only is there a deep crew base, but they're really passionate people. You don't end up in Wilmington on the way to somewhere else, right? Unless you're, I don't know, where you're going in the Atlantic Ocean to end up in Wilmington, right? And so our film industry is defined by passionate personalities. And I think that is a great sign for how successful we're going to be in the future. no matter what happens in Atlanta, Georgia, or Los Angeles, or New York, or anywhere else in the world, as long as we continue to support those people who make this community special and make this a very special place to make movies. And that's whether you're a high school student or a student at Glow Academy or at Cape Fear Community College or UNCW, wherever you are in your career as a filmmaker or a media artist, there's something very special about being in Wilmington. And I think that's an advantage that we have and that we should continue to celebrate. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here today and listening. And please come to Cucallaris in November.
Johnny, what's one thing you think could be addressed?
I would say two things, actually. One, it is crucial, as Ashley said, it's just crucial for us to be able to maintain the incentive program that we have. Look for opportunities to improve it when we can. When we meet with clients, it is either a conversation starter or a conversation stop. That is the first question that comes out of people's mouths, and they want to know the details of it. And it either, like I said, it either allows us to continue that conversation, or literally very quickly they'll say, okay, well, thank you very much, and that's the end of the conversation, and it's over. There's nothing else you can talk about. That either gets your foot in the door or it doesn't. So it's crucial for us to be able to maintain and hopefully look for improvements. The other thing, and I'm sure I'll get a chuckle out of this one, and Ashley understands it though, is that
Yes.
a direct flight to Los Angeles, and I don't know if our friends from the airport are in the room here today or not, but I used to sit on a little business community group out there, and we'd have meetings every quarter, and they'd go around the room and always ask everybody, from GE and the university and Corning and PPD, what do you need from the airlines, or what are you looking for? And when they would get around to me, they would just shake their head and they're like, I know, Johnny,
Yeah,
you want a direct flight to Los Angeles.
I just did it. I fully endorse this.
But believe it or not, through the years, I've seen, and the folks from the airport have the data, the increase in traffic from Wilmington to Los Angeles. And it is actually one of the top destinations, one of the top final destinations of people when they fly out of Wilmington. And for our clients, again, when you look at where films are being produced, and you look at these other cities, Chicago, Toronto, Germany, Atlanta, all of these places have multiple flights every day to Los Angeles, and Wilmington does not. It may sound like it's not a big issue, but for our executives, they lose a lot of time, and time is money for them. Trying to get people here to do business and get people back and forth for meetings. And so it is something that it's my dream one day for us to be able to have that. So we're certainly going to keep working on that, but that is another issue.
Well, you can be on the inaugural flight.
I'll be there with you.
Yeah, the two of you.
I'll be there.
From my perspective, I think that obviously what Johnny and Ashley have both said about the incentive is what we've all said is very important to continue to modernize it, adapt it, those sorts of things. It's working. There's no complaining about it from its current perspective, but as time rolls on, these things do need to be looked at and amended and brought up to current standards. So that's something that we would like to see happen in the next couple of years. And in addition to that, while we're looking at that incentive, I think North Carolina, with the help of the City of Wilmington and New Hanover County, in initiating a statewide DEI workforce development program where we are paying the interns to work. It's something that you have to consider. There are a lot of workforce development programs out there, and not all of them pay a living wage while you're going through the program, and that's where the North Carolina program is different. And I'm pretty certain there's not another state in the union right now that is doing it, that are paid internship programs through a nonprofit entity. So in folding in some workforce development options into our program long term, I think would be something that would be helpful to continue to grow our workforce and give Johnny the tools he needs and Ashley the tools she needs to recruit more productions to the state. In any economic development initiative you're taking on, one of the first questions you'll be asked is, what's your workforce like in X industry. And so being able to answer that question is very important, and I think everyone would agree. So hopefully as time moves forward, we'll promote the success of what North Carolina is doing and make that part of our conversation, ongoing conversation.
I think that's huge.
It is.
Hard to follow that. It feels like the most important thing on my plate. I'll add from the independent producing standpoint and perspective that access to capital is a huge barrier to entry, not just for indie producers. I'd say at any level, it's like the hardest piece of the puzzle to put together. We're talking about all these incentives. That's all about financial incentives to come to the state of North Carolina, but financing for independent productions that are going to help grow that pipeline and help produce quality filmmakers that are going to keep calling Wilmington home. That's something that I feel optimistic that has been creatively addressed, and we're making progress with involving local investors, local Wilmington investors, some of them in this room, who are financing portions of productions that are being shot here with above-the-line producers and creators, such as myself. And A Song for Imogene, we had 2 female financiers from the state of North Carolina come in and double what we raised through our crowdfunding efforts. Parrish Steichleather is in the room. He just completed a seed financing round on WeFunder, and a local film location manager came in and bridged his gap financing, putting tens of thousands of dollars into the pockets of independent producers who are committed to growing the workforce here and making movies about the region that are set in the region. These are Southern stories and Southern films, and so we're not just necessarily anywhere USA. People are interested in seeing the South in a new light, and that's something that I'm really proud to say a lot of people in this room should take interest in supporting independent film in that way so we can continue to grow.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to echo what Johnny said naturally. I'd love a direct flight. That's selfish for myself, right back to LA. It is something that seems trivial, but it is actually meaningful. The second piece about the tax incentive, our film grant program, the maintaining of it and continually looking to improve it are really important. And one thing I wanted to mention is that there are a core number of cities in the United States, and frankly globally, that are always budgeted, okay? It doesn't matter what is on the page creatively. They just budget them because they know that they're destinations that, I will say, Johnny, have been blessed by those gatekeepers. Our dream is that Wilmington becomes one of those cities. We can't just wait for someone to say, I need a beach, we'll go to Wilmington, right? There are many, many stories that are told in other states that are not set in those respective cities, right? There's one I can think of specifically very close by that has one show that specifically titled it. But there's many other shows that are nondescript. We have the capacity, we have the workforce here to support filmmaking of many different avenues and many different creative needs. So if we could become a city that is a core budgeted city, that's a dream, right? Because then you're a part of inception and you're a part of the beginning of the process of when they decide to bring a production. So making sure that those programs are incredibly competitive is very important in making that dream a reality. So yeah. And then obviously all of the work that's done from a workforce development standpoint. It's something that we have a program in Chicago and Toronto that we look to launch here as well. Workforce development, I'd mentioned, is one of those 3 pillars. It's essential, right? And you've got to, work with the community of today to protect for the community of tomorrow. So we're very, very much passionate about that as well, alongside our partners. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists today? Thank you for your time and giving us the update so we all sound smart at our dinner parties this weekend. And for your time, for our speaker gifts, we have something to keep you hydrated. And while they're passing them out, I know some of the audience have the coveted, or previous speakers have the coveted, bringing the power to breakfast coffee tumblers. Yep. You guys are the first to get the big gulp size. So thank you, small token from us at the Business Journal for really just educating us on what's been going on in this industry, which we all find fascinating, whether we're in it or not. And thank you to all of you for spending your morning with us and all the thoughtful questions and great questions that you sent in. Do not forget, before you leave, the tent card that's on your table is your parking. pass from Highland Roofing, so don't leave without that. And we will see all of you in a couple weeks at Live Oak Pavilion at Feast Wilmington. Thanks and have a great day.